Until one night he came face to face with this up in the attic, and he saw this towering, 9-foot tall figure that's just darker than the darkness that surrounds it.
He's called the Hat Man, and in 2013, Sam Donaldson saw him. Here's my husband Damon with the details.
It was sometime after midnight when Sam Donaldson stood alone inside of this house on Taylor Mill Road. He had a bottle of holy water in one hand and a container of salt in the other. By this point, he was just a fraction of the man who had moved his family into this house years earlier. He had lost tons of weight, his eyes were sunken in, and the migraines had become almost unbearable. Sam had reached a point where he truly believed that whatever was inside of this house was trying to kill him. But Sam, well, he didn't lay down to bullies, so he refused to leave. "Nothing tonight?" he shouted into the darkness. "What? Are you afraid?" The house remained silent. And then the smell hit him. Sulfur, rotten flesh, something dead. And right then, a pain exploded inside of his head, so powerful that it forced him down. And at that exact moment, the television ripped itself from the wall mount and dropped directly on top of him. Well, he rolled out of the way, but still it hit him hard in the side. And then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. They moved across the floor directly behind him, and then they began to climb the stairs toward the attic. Well, Sam got to his feet, grabbed the holy water and the salt, and followed after. And with every step upward, the temperature eerily dropped. The air began to thicken, until finally, when he reached the very last step, he could barely breathe. And then he saw him. The Hat Man. But this nightmare didn't begin in the attic. No, it began years earlier when Sam had first seen this house on Taylor Mill Road, and something in the ether told him that he just had to have it.
Welcome to Velarcana. Here, we share mysteries that often defy explanation. I research the cases, and my husband shares the stories.
In the summer of 2007, Sam Donaldson was out driving when he passed a house on Taylor Mill Road in Taylor Mill, Kentucky. There was nothing especially grand about this house. No, just a modern-looking two-story home sitting on a quiet stretch of country road. But for some reason, Sam just couldn't stop looking at it. So he pulled over to the side of the road and then just gazed at it for a while. It were as if something inside of this house was somehow tugging at his soul. And the house? Well, it wasn't even for sale. Interestingly, he did this again the next day, and then the next. And after a while, he started parking in the driveway as he stared up at the house.
And he said he did this for days on end, for weeks. And he had no idea why, but he would just pull in and just stare up at it.
Then one day, a car finally pulled up and a woman stepped out, clearly startled to find a strange man parked in her driveway. "Can I help you?" Well, Sam explained that he was super interested in the house and he would like to buy it. And to his shock, even though the house was not for sale, the woman said that she would sell it to him, and for cheap. And just 1 week later, they had a deal. Now, get this. $45,000 for this beautiful two-story home. Well, Sam could hardly believe it. This was a dream come true. And when he stepped inside, it looked almost brand new. Most of it felt warm and comfortable, but there was one area that did not. Part of the attic was unfinished. Now, heat rises, so this room should have been stifling in the summer heat, but it wasn't. No. For some reason, it was cold, unusually cold. Still, Sam wasn't concerned. Whatever it was, well, Sam could fix it. So, just a month later, Sam and his family moved in. And all was happy as they unpacked. But then, Sam walked into the master bathroom. He laid his clothes out for work, and he turned to the mirror, smiling at his good fortune. But when he did, strangely, he was suddenly overcome by this feeling of hopelessness, and he found himself on the verge of crying. As a matter of fact, this was so intense that he almost buckled over. But he finally regained his composure, and then he joined his family for dinner. Later that night, when he climbed into bed, he basked in the feeling of security. He was now a homeowner. This was going to be his happy ever after. Unfortunately for Sam, he had no idea that something in that house had actually been waiting for him to arrive.
Velarcana.
A few months after settling in, Sam and Jody were jolted awake by a powerful, repeated thud. It sounded as if someone were stomping across the floor in the attic. A second later, their daughter, Charlie, burst into the bedroom, terrified. "There's somebody upstairs." Well, Sam looked at the clock. It was 3:13 in the morning. Thinking that maybe someone had broken in, he grabbed his gun and he headed for the attic. But strangely, with every step that he took, the air somehow thickened, and he found it progressively more difficult to breathe. The closer he got to the attic, the more pressure he felt on his chest. It was as if the house itself were somehow trying to stop him from reaching the attic. Well, Sam made it to the top. He stopped, and he listened. The pounding was definitely coming from the unfinished portion, which was just on the other side of this door. So Sam lunged into the room, prepared to confront whoever was up there, but strangely and eerily, the room was empty. That would have gotten me, for sure. Well, after a minute of puzzling and scratching his head, he put Charlie back to bed and he and Jody went back to sleep. Now, this next part is extremely interesting to me, and it happened more than once. Let me know what you guys make of this, because I have no clue. The next morning, as Sam went to start the coffee, he noticed that the welcome home candle was standing upright in the middle of the kitchen floor. What? So is that like a thing with hauntings, or maybe the Hat Man? Let me know in the comments. Well, later, while the family was preparing breakfast, a smoke alarm began shrieking upstairs. So Sam climbed the stairs back toward the attic, and once again, the air grew heavier with every step. Well, he finally found the alarm and he removed the batteries. But strangely, it sounded again. So he replaced the detector altogether with a new one, and eventually this new one did the exact same thing. One morning, as they were all having breakfast, Sam noticed that Charlie was unusually quiet. She sat staring down at her plate, distracted and exhausted. "Everything all right?" he asked. Well, Charlie didn't look up as she spoke, but she did speak in this matter-of-fact, fearful tone. "She wouldn't let me sleep." Sam looked at her. Who wouldn't let you sleep?" "The little girl in the closet," Charlie replied. Then she went on to say that there was a little girl that had been hiding inside of her closet, and this little girl was terrified of the mean man upstairs.
But his daughter would see her in her closet, and she was terrified of that closet.
As Charlie spoke, a cold chill ran down Sam and Jody's spine. Just a few nights earlier, they were sure that someone was upstairs in the attic, and for a moment, they didn't know how to respond. So Jody suggested that maybe Charlie had experienced a nightmare. But Charlie insisted no, she had been awake when she saw this mysterious little girl. The most likely answer, of course, was that Charlie had been frightened by that pounding above her room. So, speaking in terms that his daughter would understand, Sam promised that he would have a talk with both the little girl and with the mean man upstairs, and he would tell both of them that this was the family's house now, and they were not allowed to bother her anymore. Well, up until this point, only the family had experienced strange phenomena with this house, but soon the neighbors would as well. Coming home one evening, Sam saw several police cars in the driveway, and fear gripped him immediately. What had happened? Was his family okay? Well, he spoke to one of the officers, who told him that a neighbor had called 911 after hearing a woman screaming bloody murder from inside of the house. Well, Sam instantly thought of Jody and then tried to run toward the house, but he was stopped. The police were insistent that they needed to go in first and check out the scene. So, terrified at what they might find, he gave them his keys, and then he watched as 3 officers entered the house with guns drawn. But just then, behind him, another car pulled into the driveway, and Jody and Charlie got out. They had gone for ice cream. So, if Jody hadn't been the one in the house, well then who had been screaming, right? Well, the officers searched every room, but they found no intruder, no injured woman, and no explanation at all for that scream. When the family finally stepped inside of the house, Jody suddenly stopped. What's that smell? The house reeked, almost as if something, or maybe someone, had just died inside of the house. And then now here we go again. Sitting upright in the middle of the kitchen floor was that welcome home candle.
Velarcana.
At this point, Sam had no idea that soon he would be standing face to face with an entity known as the Hat Man. But after the neighbors heard someone screaming inside of his house when no one was home, Sam could no longer pretend that nothing supernatural was happening, but nothing made sense. Sam did not believe in the paranormal. No, he was a man of science. The universe might be strange, but still it followed rules. There was always an explanation. Bad wiring, animals inside of the walls, maybe, stress, perhaps. But soon, Sam would experience something that just couldn't be explained by science. As Sam was enjoying a quiet evening in the house alone, Jody and Charlie had gone to get groceries. A car's headlights moved across the window. Well, Sam glanced over, expecting to see Jody pulling into the driveway. But instead, now, check this out. He saw someone standing inside of his house. Silhouetting the windows was the shadow of a little girl. While Sam blinked, this had to be a trick of the eyes, but then the little girl moved.
A little girl walked right by and then right into what was their bedroom.
As she walked by, Sam got a really good look at her, and he could tell that she was wearing clothes from another era.
This long, flowy dress that had all these ruffles, and she had this hair that kind of came down to her shoulder and was kind of curled up.
Well, Sam sat frozen on the couch. This is how people die in horror movies, he whispered to himself. Well, then finally he got enough courage and he got up and headed toward the master bedroom. When he opened the door, he was relieved to see that there was no one there. But then he noticed the master bathroom door was standing open. So he quietly crossed the room, reached the bathroom, and then flipped on the light. Empty. Well, Sam breathed a sigh of relief. Of course, the bathroom was empty. But then, a sharp pain exploded inside of his head, and he grabbed the bathroom counter to keep from falling over. After regaining his composure, he opened the medicine cabinet and was hit by a nightmare.
And he opens up the medicine cabinet and he sees all these roaches just pour out.
Sam is this big guy, but the one thing that he was afraid of was bugs. And a moment later, he was on the ground protecting his face and screaming. Well, right after that, someone entered the room, and Sam just knew that this was it. He was gonna die. But then the figure spoke. Honey, what's wrong? It was Jody. Well, Sam blinked, looked around the bathroom. The cockroaches were gone. Not wanting to look any more foolish than he already did, Sam shared very little about what had happened. Later that night, every smoke detector inside of the house began beeping at the exact same time, as if all of the batteries were dying at once. So Sam removed the batteries, but the beeping continued. Then everyone smelled that strange odor of death again. Well, this was all just too much, and Sam sat alone on the couch until morning with his head in his hands. He kept thinking about the life that he had imagined when he first saw this house. He thought everything was going to be so perfect, but the house had slowly begun to change him. The migraines only got worse, and as the months turned into years, the activity escalated. Footsteps in empty rooms, cold spots, electronics switching themselves on and then switching themselves back off again. Those incessant smoke detectors never given him a second's rest. That welcome home candle somehow repeatedly finding its way into the middle of the kitchen floor, as if to say, "Hello, I see you." Well, Sam stopped sleeping, and he could barely eat. He lost tons of weight, and his eyes became dark and sunken, and the strong, hopeful man who had waited in that driveway for hours was slowly disappearing.
So you had the smoke detectors, you had all these things going on, voices. I mean, you name it, that's really messing with Sam in particular. It targeted him. It seemed like this home was doing everything it could to drive him insane.
Jody and Charlie just could not handle it. They left the house and they moved in with friends. Still, Sam refused to sell. He had promised his family a better life, and selling felt like failure. He had bought that house for his family. He had promised them stability. And somewhere inside of him, he still believed that if he could somehow stand his ground, he just might be able to win back control. Sam had heard that holy water and salt could sometimes calm situations like this. At one point in his life, he would have laughed at that idea, but now he was willing to try anything. So one night, Sam returned to the house with a gallon of holy water and a brand new canister of salt. Overkill? Maybe not. Well, darkness settled over the rooms, and for a change, the house was completely silent. But that silence didn't bring relief. No, this was obviously deliberate. So Sam shouted into the darkness, "Nothing tonight? Why don't you come out and do some more of your magic tricks? You don't scare me anymore." Well, that wasn't true. Deep down inside, Sam was terrified, and he would soon learn that it might not have been the best idea to have taunted whatever it was that was inside of this house. Well, for several seconds, nothing happened. Then the smell of sulfur filled the room, and a powerful migraine suddenly exploded through Sam's skull. Well, he dropped, and then the television came loose of its wall mount. Well, he rolled out of the way, but still it slammed into his ribs, and for a moment he laid there in pain and disbelief. He had actually been attacked by something otherworldly. That's impossible. Then he heard the footsteps. They moved through the room directly behind him. Then they started climbing the stairs toward the attic. "All right," Sam said, "this ends tonight." He grabbed the bottle of holy water and the salt, and then he began to climb. This was going to be his final stand. As he ascended, though, the temperature unnaturally dropped, and toward the top, Sam could even see his breath in front of his face. Well, he shook it off, and then he told himself the plan was simple. Reach the attic, pour the salt across the doorway, douse the room with holy water, and then force whatever it was that was up there to get the hell out of his house. But when he reached the threshold, Sam froze in terror, and he couldn't believe his eyes.
Velarcana.
until one night he came face to face with this up in the attic, and he saw this figure, and it's very similar to what a lot of people call Batman now, that dark shadow figure. And it's just a towering, 9 foot tall, I'd say, figure that's just darker than the darkness that surrounds it.
Sam could not believe his eyes, and he stood frozen by what he saw. Across the room was a towering, shadowy figure, disturbing as it had no face, no eyes, no mouth, no facial details at all. Yet Sam could tell that it was definitely conscious, and it was aware that Sam was there. It appeared entirely black, with what looked like a hat rising from the top of its head, and even though it seemed to be a shadow, it was somehow darker than the darkness around it. Well, Sam had not expected this, and for just a moment, he couldn't move. The salt and the holy water remained locked in his hands, ready to jump into action, but his body just would not respond. He had spent years telling himself that there was a rational explanation for everything that had happened inside of that house. But now, there was something that he couldn't explain standing directly in front of him. Well, after a second, Sam found the courage, broke free from his paralysis, and he ran. He raced downstairs, through the living room, and out the side door. He climbed into his car, locked all of the doors, and then he turned on all of the lights. Sam knew that the battery would probably be dead by morning, but he didn't care. A dead battery was better than going back inside of that house. When Jody found him the next day, he was still sitting out in his car in the driveway in front of the house. Ironic, don't you think? That's where this story had begun, with him sitting in this driveway, looking up at this dream house, at least he thought. Well, eventually, they walked into the house together. Sam entered the master bathroom, then he looked into the mirror where, on that first night, he had felt his happiness dissipate. This time, the reflection staring back at him belonged to a stranger, a tired, terrified man, a man who looked completely and utterly defeated. He had finally seen what had lived in that attic, and in that moment, he had realized that for some reason that he couldn't quite understand, that this house had wanted him there, and it had been that voice in the ether calling to him that very first day. And just then, now this is another check this out moment, Sam suffered another migraine, but this one was so severe that he collapsed, and then Jody had to rush him to the hospital.
While Sam was in the hospital, he still was hell-bent on getting back inside this home, even though his family was like, no, we're never stepping foot in there again. And so they had a priest come in, and he never believed in religion. He never believed in anything, but this was kind of his Hail Mary. I'm going to bring in a priest.
Jody met the priest, Father Schaefer, at the house, and she explained everything that had happened. The footsteps, the smoke detectors, the terrible odors, and the way that Sam's health had deteriorated over the years. As they sat at the kitchen table talking, they heard a faint sound coming from somewhere in the distance. At first, it sounded like someone mumbling. Then it became louder. And strangely, these voices morphed into music, while Father Schaefer and Jody followed the sound downstairs into the basement, and it led them to an old tube radio that Sam had moved into his workshop. This is where the music was coming from. But now, and this is absolutely crazy, the radio was unplugged. What? Where was the electricity coming from? Well, before either of them could make any sense of that, a violent boom echoed from upstairs. They rushed back up, and then they found, now, wait for it, the welcome home candle sitting upright in the middle of the living room floor. Well, after everything Jody had told him, and everything that he had just witnessed, Father Schaefer agreed that he would bless the house. So he placed a crucifix onto the table, but just as he was reaching back into his bag, the crucifix flew across the room and slammed into the wall. Well, the priest's face turned pale, as if he had never seen something so violent. Then, after a second, he pulled out a small bottle of holy water. "There's definitely something here," he whispered as he began to sprinkle the holy water. A moment later, and this is another crazy part of the story, Father Schaefer was suddenly lifted into the air and then thrown across the room into the coffee table. He struck his head hard, and blood actually began running down his face. Well, he got to his feet, and then he ran from the house and never came back. After that, the family felt completely hopeless. Sam remained in the hospital, and Jody and Charlie stayed wherever they could. Whenever possible, Jody rented the house out, trying to make enough money to cover the mortgage. Then, in late October 2013, she received an unusual phone call. Two paranormal investigators, Austin Lawrence and his partner Irv, were investigating another location nearby, and they needed a place to stay for about a week. Someone had suggested Sam and Jody's house. When they walked in, they weren't expecting anything supernatural to happen at this house. No, their focus was another house. But, oh, weren't they surprised?
Honestly, we went in expecting absolutely nothing. A new house, new construction, new everything. And it wasn't until we were just walking around, looking around, and I walk into a room and a woman says hello, loud enough for everyone in the house to hear, that we were like, oh crap, there's actually something here. Let's go get the equipment and come back in.
Over the following days, this investigative team claimed that they experienced many of the same things that the family had. Heavy footsteps in empty rooms, the odor of death appearing from nowhere and then lingering in the air. But what Austin said unnerved him the most was what he had experienced with the batteries and the electronics.
One of the things that we definitely experienced a lot of was the typical battery drain, but it was at a much higher level than I've ever seen it before. I mean, freshly charged batteries dead instantly as soon as you pull them off the charger, as if something was draining them. But as far as electronics, definitely the more horrifying thing was electronics turning on that were unplugged or had no power running to them. That was something that definitely unnerved me quite a bit, to say the least.
The activity quickly became violent. Kitchen cabinets began flinging themselves open, sending cups and plates crashing onto the floor. Bedroom doors opened and slammed shut at the exact same time that the entire house violently shook. One night in the basement, Austin claimed that an unseen force lifted him against a wall, held him there for a moment, and later he began to cough up blood. Then, on their sixth night, Austin and Irv experienced this brilliant flash of light.
That entire room was just instantly filled with white light, the brightest white light to where all you can see is white.
That flash of light originated in the attic, so they grabbed a ghost box and carried it upstairs. Once they crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped so low that they both could see the breath in front of their faces. Then Austin began asking questions. Is anybody here? Well, at that very moment, something moved in the corner of the room, a shadow. So Austin asked, why was it there? And the voice that came through the ghost box? Well,
the voice that came across, I can't even begin to describe it. It was the deepest, most guttural. If you wanted to create a sound or a voice for a demon in a horror movie, this would have been it, and it would have terrified everyone.
And what did this deep, gravelly voice say? Well, just 2 words. Oh, but those 2 words. It said, kill Sam.
Velarcana.
Not long after Austin and Irv investigated this home, the house was sold and the family moved out. Austin said that the figure he had seen resembled an entity reported by many people in different places, a tall, completely dark figure wearing a hat. Austin said that some people call this the Hat Man. He said that others call it the Top Hat Man. Austin and Irv believe that whatever was in that house was pure evil. Now, the skeptic in me says, a ghost box? Picking up a voice that says, kill Sam? Well, that seems a bit much. Ghost boxes are controversial. The way I understand how they work is by rapidly scanning radio frequencies, and the critics argue that random fragments of broadcasts can sometimes sound like someone, or I guess something, is speaking through them, but that doesn't mean that that's actually what's happening. And while the investigators did report that they experienced many of the same things that the family did, still, like many ghost stories, there is no solid evidence. But here is what I do find interesting about this case. Long before Austin and Irv ever entered that house, Charlie, the daughter, had described a mean man upstairs in the attic. Sam repeatedly heard pounding coming from that attic, and then he said that he saw that towering figure in the attic. And it was, of course, in that attic that the two investigators saw that shadowy figure and recorded that statement, "Kill Sam." Kill Sam. In the end, Sam and Jody lost their first home, and yet when it was finally gone, they felt relieved. The family moved into a small trailer in a crowded park on a rundown side of town. It was nothing like the two-story home that Sam had once dreamed of owning, but the fear was gone. And interestingly, so were those incessant migraines. Sam later said that the experience made their marriage stronger. It made him appreciate his family, his life, and the simple safety of being somewhere they could live without fear. Maybe something in that house actually did choose Sam. But in the end, well, Sam, he did what I would have done. He chose his family.
Artificial intelligence is interesting, isn't it? It'll tell you that the Hat Man is a relatively new phenomenon, but AI is wrong. Sightings of an almost identical shadowy figure wearing a hat go back centuries. Only recently have people begun to call him the Hat Man. And interestingly, there was one final detail Austin shared that, well, blew me away. He found out that during a previous renovation, the owners tore open the attic walls and found something bizarre. 3 30-gallon drums full of seashells. Now, I wasn't able to independently verify that, but if it's true, that's a classic sign of defensive magic. For centuries, people hid seashells inside their walls as protective charms, specifically meant to ward off evil spirits and witches. Perhaps once the shells were gone, the protection was gone. And speaking of witches, as many of you know, we recently rescued a black cat. And he is a little shit, but we love him. Now, it's not only Arcana who crashes the studio. No, check out this blooper of him trying to steal the show as Damon films earlier this week.
Stood alone inside of this house on Taylor Mill Road. He had a bottle of water. Seriously? I'm trying to film here. I'll be back.
And I snapped this picture of him literally climbing books. And speaking of climbing, well, we're still hoping to get 23 more monthly master members. After 1 year at that level, you get a signed shirt of your choice for free. If you'd like to help support what we do, head on over to our Buy Me a Coffee page. Any support helps. And if that's not possible, watching our videos, sharing them with friends, leaving a comment, it all makes a huge difference. However you support us, thank you. We genuinely consider you part of our family of truth seekers. And as always, stay curious.